Hello and welcome back to the Power Builder Fundamentals self-guided course. In Lab 24, within Unit 24, let's have a look at the lab setup. We're going to examine the Easy Order library files in the solution directory. If the Easy Order system Power Builder library is compiled into an executable, and all the remaining Easy Order library files are compiled into either portable code or PBDs or dynamic link libraries, machine code, is it necessary to create a Power Builder resource file? Think about that carefully. Assembly option number 1, portable code or PBD files. In this example, we're going to create an Easy Order application executable. We're going to attach the external resources to that, and we're going to attach also some Power Builder components that we've saved in one of the Power Builder libraries to the executable. Then for the remainder of the libraries, we're going to create a dynamic link library, customer, order, and of course, products. For assembly option number 2, one large executable only. So in this example, this is created by linking all the external objects into the executable. And then for each Power Builder library, all the Power Builder components that are in each library will be compiled into the appropriate either P code, portable code, or machine code, depending on your project options. So lab debriefing. Which assembly option did you choose, and why? Open the Project Wizard's dialog box and note the Power Builder non-visual objects can be deployed to other platforms, including .NET Assemblies and .NET Web Services. So let's have a look at the Power Builder IDE. First of all, let's go back to the unit discussion that we had before we got into the lab, talking about dynamic library. In this example here, we can use either the system tree using the right-hand mouse button to build a runtime library, or we can open the library painter and we can do exactly the same thing. From any one of these libraries, we can use the right-hand mouse button and build a library. So it doesn't matter how you invoke that particular dialog. I'm going to use the system tree now and build a runtime library just for this one Power Builder library. Again, the key is I'm going to build a dynamic library. I have the choice, again, either machine code or portable code if a machine code is not checked. Then I'm going to hit OK. In this example here, we can see that the Demo2 Power Builder library that I have has some of my ancestors in it. And of course, if you double click it, you can open the ancestor and you can see the code around that particular object. You can look at the properties, you can look at the events that have been added, functions that you've been added. So let's go back here to the system tree. And I'm going to go and modify the library list. I'm going to change the fact that I am looking at a Power Builder library, and I'd like to change that so that I'm actually looking at demo2.pbd or a dynamic library. Again, I can change that, and then in the system tree, we can see the same objects. Notice that if I double click it or use the right-hand mouse button, I cannot open the object. I'm looking at a compiled version of the object with no source code. I can see the methods, however, such as functions or events. I can see properties, including the instance variables that I've added, but I cannot see the actual code behind the object. So this is a great way, for example, if you've created an ancestor Power Builder library and you want to deploy that to other application development teams, and so that they can actually see and use the objects, but not actually change the source code. So that's deployment option number 1, sharing objects across different development teams. So let's go back now to the system tree. We'll just reset this back to a list of Power Builder libraries and go in here to actually build a deployment. Notice that what I've done here in my demo libraries, I've taken all the objects out of the initial library that I started way back in Unit 1, and I've moved it to either Demo 1 and Demo 2. The first library now only contains the application object. I'm going to use this first library to also store my project objects because project objects do not get compiled into the deployment scenario. So let's use the New button here. We're going to select a project, in this case an application, and we can fill in the actual name itself. I'll call it a demo. This is an example here of generating a P code 32-bit, so I'm going to call it a 32p.exe. This is my naming convention. You don't have to use it, but as soon as I look at the executable, I know it's 32 bits, and I notice from the P that it's compiled into P code. So at this point, I typically would not recommend the Windows Classic design style. Leave that unchecked. And if you're doing a lot of merging and source control, you may want to change the build option to full. The default is incremental. For the new PowerBuilder compiler that's available in PowerBuilder 2017 and above, you're going to see a new PowerBuilder compiler text area here, which shows you the actual commands that are being sent to the new compiler that's included only with this particular version of PowerBuilder. So all the options that you choose here change the way that the command line is built to actually run the actual compile. You can do now the compile outside of PowerBuilder in PowerBuilder 2017 only. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to save this. We'll save this as a project. So I use PJ as the prefix. That's the one I like. And I'll call this demo, we'll call it 32-bit P-code exe. So I know from the name here, for example, this is exactly what it does. Now what I'd like to do at this point is have a look at the libraries. You can see here that we have two libraries that actually contain objects that are useful to us, which is demo 1 and demo 2. The application object is in the first library, but typically that's the only object that I like to compile into executable, so I do not check the first library. That'll make sure that the application object a_demo here is compiled. Remember, the project objects are not considered runtime components, so they get ignored by the compiler. So at this point, we can actually hit the save button, and then you can notice here that you have on your toolbar, you can actually deploy the actual project, which means to build the executable itself, and we can also run the actual executable from here as well. You may also complete the version information here about the PowerBuilder application that you've done. Change these default names here that reflects your PowerBuilder application within your company and the product version and file version that you would also see within your particular application. So at this point, once this is all done, what I typically do is I do a save as here, and I may want to also build a 64-bit P code at this point. For the 32-bit version, I would also probably do a file save as, and I'll create a 32-bit machine code executable as option as well. And you notice all I have to do here after doing a save as and creating a duplicate, I just change the machine code that or the option from P code to machine code, and I'll save that away. And for the actual machine code, that we're going to change that option here to 32-bit. I do like to put in error information. I do like to optimize the executable code, the C code, for speed. And those are my favorite options here. And I'm going to change the actual executable name to 32M for machine code.exe. All right, so now I have one that will actually build a P code 32-bit, another project that'll build a 64-bit P code executable. So now I have a choice here of 3 different projects how I can actually deploy the executable. And now I can actually use the right-hand mouse button here, and I can actually deploy from here as well. So I don't need that extra toolbar, so I don't need to open up the project. But I can deploy the executable now in 3 different formats. And now I can do my testing. I can give these 3 different formats to the QA people and find out where the functionality works properly and whether a M code or P code is faster and whether a 64-bit application executable is actually better on memory. So the QA people can come back and tell me that, or I can use these different executables in my unit testing. So that's all there is to actually creating a deployment scenario at this point. And those were a few tips that I wanted to pass along to you before you did the lab. So if you haven't already done so, please complete Lab 24 at this point, and then get ready for the self-assessment to test your knowledge of both the Unit 24 and Lab 24 materials that you just covered. Congratulations, you've completed Lab 24. Also, congratulations, you've now completed the entire PowerBuilder Fundamentals self-guided course. Thank you for taking the time to work through the particular materials and the labs. Throughout the course, we've given you the basic building blocks on how to build a PowerBuilder application and interact with the PowerBuilder IDE, and we showed you a few new advanced features to perk your interest in continuing your education path through the PowerBuilder development system. Please click the arrow at the center of the screen when it appears to return to any of the previous units.